Now it's time for On Point, where we speak to experts to delve deeper into the biggest news stories in the spotlight right now. Russia and Ukraine have been locked in a bitter tug-of-war ever since Moscow annexed the Crimean Peninsula in 2014. It had largely gone pretty quiet for a number of years, but in recent weeks we've seen tensions reignited over Moscow's troop deployment near Ukraine's border. Russian President Vladimir Putin really putting the pressure on the US for some form of security guarantees that would stop NATO expanding east to Ukraine, which President Putin views as an effort by the West to encircle Russia.
NATO and Ukraine have so far insisted they will not be swayed by Moscow's threats, adding NATO membership is open to any qualifying nation, including Ukraine. So where does this situation leave us, and could the tensions bubble over into something more serious? For the answers to these questions and more, we're joined by Mark Barry, the Associate Editor of the International Journal on World Peace. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning.
So let's start with a question on most people's lips. Are we about to see Russia invade Ukraine again?
It's not too likely, and I think it's because President Biden was forced to admit in recent weeks that the U.S. in fact would not defend Ukraine if invaded, and instead the emphasis was put on financial sanctions, including taking Russia off of the SWIFT money transfer system. So it seems that the 2014 takeover of Crimea had a lot to do with the fact that actually it was almost always part of Russia until Khrushchev gave it to the Ukraine in 1954. I remember Kissinger a few years ago even being asked if Khrushchev was drunk when he did that, but Khrushchev was Ukrainian. But in any case, we should remember that the Black Sea Fleet is based at the Sevastopol naval base in the Crimea. And that provides access to the Mediterranean and the Middle East for Russia. So basically, I think Putin believes that military force is the language that the U.S. and NATO best understand.
Yeah, I mean, Crimea, the main driving force, many experts have said, is access to that seaport, which is crucially important for Russia. But considering that this idea of Ukraine possibly joining NATO is absolutely nothing new, it's been talked about for years, potentially. Can you walk us through what you think might have changed in recent weeks to prompt Putin to deploy all these Russian troops so close to Ukraine?
Well, we have a different president as of January 20th, no longer President Trump. President Trump twisted a lot of arms in NATO to pay up more, and he showed a very cool attitude. And presumably Putin felt that he didn't have any worries about any more nations joining NATO, because it had been already brought up in 2014 that NATO could be invited to join NATO. But the other reason, I think, is not only a new president, but the fact that the U.S. exhibited a very abrupt and clumsy, and in the eyes of many, humiliating pullout from Afghanistan after 20 years and the expenditure of trillions of dollars. So in my view, Putin perceived these as signs of American weakness, and that's what really made him act in the threatening manner that he has in the last couple of months or so.
Now, Mark, Russia largely blames Ukraine for the crisis, and NATO as well for cooperating with Kiev. Can you understand Putin's frustrations with what he sees as NATO's steady encroachment toward Russia?
Well, you know, in my view, I mean, we all celebrated the end of the Cold War, but we didn't realize what a difficult process this was for Russia, and that things did not work out ideally. I mean, even Gorbachev the other day said that this was not the way he wanted things to end. So I see this as the fruition of American and NATO taking advantage of the collapse of the Soviet Union, which to a certain extent culminated in 2004 with the admission of most Warsaw Pact allies to NATO, and then, of course, the 2014 offer for Ukraine to join. But to me, this relates to how the USSR collapsed in the first place 30 years ago this week, and the fact that Ukraine, which is not well known in the West, gained control of territory that once had traditionally been Russia's. In fact, of all places in Seoul, Korea, I met several times the Belarusian president at that time, Shushkevich. He's the one who signed the Commonwealth of Independent States Treaty on December 9th, 1991, and he was the one asked by the other attendees to pick up the phone, actually by Yeltsin, to pick up the phone and call Gorbachev and ask him to step down. So, you know, Russia's historical experience, especially in view of the invasions of Russia by Napoleon and Hitler in 1940 or 41, gives them the belief that they require defensive depth, and thus its neighbors to the west and the south are critical for Russian security.
Right, and we can see that maybe Russia is trying to cozy up to China in so much to try and firm up its own security to a different degree. But with the two sides then, so we've got NATO and US on one side, Russia on the other, it appears very unlikely that either are going to budge publicly on their demands. But we have this upcoming meeting in Geneva between the US and Russia, presumably the top diplomats from both sides. Lavrov and Blinken are going to be there. A lot of eyes are going to be focused on that due to this crisis. Do you have much hope that this meeting could potentially diffuse the situation, or do you think this has to be something that has to be sorted out between Biden and Putin themselves?
Well, you know, compared to North Korea, there's a heck of a lot more communication that goes on. I mean, you know, back in FDR's day, you had Averell Harriman, who was a stand-in for FDR to talk to Stalin. So I have every confidence that the communication is very, very good, and I think there's a very good chance it will cool down for now. But that's just for 2021, early 2022. It doesn't mean that Putin will forget about the Ukraine. His security interests are the same. So he's going to wait, I think, until Biden appears even weaker to get what he wants. Perhaps he'll wait till after the midterm elections in November of next year. But I should note for all of your viewers that among Korea's surrounding powers, Russia is the one that is most in favor, if not the only one, truly in favor of a unified or eventual reunification of Korea, because it will benefit them and particularly the Russian Far East. Moreover, Russia also knows it has a singular role it had a singular role in creating the DPRK in 1948 and in enabling North Korea to start the Korean War. So, interestingly, with all of this said, Russia may in fact play a better role in the peninsula's future than anyone else. So, we should see that Russia acts according to what it believes are its best interests, and sometimes those interests may in fact be beneficial to the Korean Peninsula.
All right, Mark, thank you so much for your insights again. Hope to talk to you again soon.
Okay, thank you very much, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.